ONTV Fantasy Football League podcast. We are in week 13, Thanksgiving week. We made it past the first bye-apocalypse, but we only have one more to go after this, and then it's the fantasy playoffs. Joe, how you doing? How's the fantasy team looking? What's your concern level going into playoffs? What's it look like?
Well, you got to describe this period as crunch time. You know, if you're on the bubble, you got to string some wins together. It's so easy if you get a losing streak going to just fall into that bottom tier that doesn't make the playoff cuts. And that's what it's all about right now, is just making sure that you get into the playoffs, because it begins a whole new season.
Yeah.
So there's like this panic mode of just making sure that you don't put together a string of losses and get knocked out of the playoffs. And, you know, the ONTV League, you know, I started off so good in that league. I think I mentioned before that I started off like 4-0, and now I can't win a game to save my life. And part of it is injuries. Part of it is bad luck. We'll talk about some of my bad luck this past weekend. But I'm getting a little nervous. I'm down there on the bubble where if someone wins a couple of games and I lose a couple of games, I'm out.
Yeah, it seems like the standings this year more than ever in almost all leagues, it's just really close. And it's down to the wire. I know in our ESPN league, it's down to the wire. In the big league that we have, you know, there's still a good chunk of people that are trying to make the playoffs. And then, as we'll see in the ONTV league, like you said, it's close. And, I mean, it would have been even closer if, you know, the cards fell right. Unfortunately, we had a kind of a big upset that threw a wrench in everything. But even still, it's pretty close. And the seeding is going to probably matter a bit, too. So, yeah, it's been pretty crazy. And now, at least we don't have any buys to worry about this week. So everybody's got their full lineups. But the scattering of primetime games and Thursday, and we're starting to get into weather situations where we saw last week on Thursday night, there was snow on the ground, and it was pretty crazy. Now, they did end up scoring a good amount of points, but I've heard that in the forecast for Sunday night of the Bills and the 49ers, there could be a lot of snow.
And it's in Buffalo?
I believe it's in Buffalo, yeah.
Okay.
Which would cause chaos in that game. And there's already some injuries in that game that might throw things off. So we're getting into that time where it gets nervy when you get weather games like that.
Yeah, and, you know, I don't put too much thought into it on draft day, but you do kind of want to look at teams that play indoors this time of the year, and especially when it comes to kickers. You know, maybe a good strategy would be to, you know, start a defense that's playing in weather, because it's going to be a low-scoring game. But kickers, if you have a kicker that's playing in the elements, you got to bench him. It's ridiculous to you know, risk missed short kicks.
Right, and that was kind of a big thing for the Lions this year. The Lions only played, they only played 2 more outdoor games, and I think they've only played one other. So that was the big thing going into the fantasy season, is that the Lions only had like 3 outdoor games all season. All the rest are domes, and they're known as the dome team. So that's good news for them. And then one of their outdoor games at the end of the year is at San Francisco. Wow. So you don't really have to worry about the weather there. And the only one you really would have to worry about is Chicago in a couple weeks. So that could be scary, because that's in the fantasy playoffs. But other than that, you know, they have a pretty smooth schedule. Speaking of the schedule and the matchups, last week's top scorer was me.
You had one of those weeks where you beat up on one of the teams really hoping to try to make the playoffs, and her hopes have diminished thanks to your bullying.
Yeah, so unfortunately, Becky once again had to go up against the top scoring team in the league.
2 weeks in a row,
and Becky once again put up a pretty solid performance from her team. But like I said last week, I also was needing a win. I was on that playoff bubble, so as much as I wanted Becky to, you know, have a chance to make it, I needed to get in myself before I could really root for Becky's team. And my team came through. Jaden Daniels, when Josh Allen was on a bye, Jaden Daniels stepped up great in the Dallas game. Unfortunately, they lost, but in fantasy, that doesn't really matter. Jaden Daniels had 74 rushing yards. He ended up having 2 passing touchdowns, one a deep shot to tie the game to Terry McLaurin.
Oh, that came so late, and I was facing McLaurin in another league, and he wasn't doing all that much, and then he catches this. Who'd they play?
Dallas.
Dallas was like in this prevent defense. McLaurin catches this pass and just
runs by
through the defense and into the end zone. What are you playing a prevent defense for?
Yeah.
There's a famous quote where some coach said, when you play prevent defense, the only thing that does is prevent you from winning.
Yeah.
And that was a perfect example of that.
I was going to say, prevent defense, I could go on a whole tangent about how much I hate it. I've seen too many teams lose by doing it. But, so crazy game. Jaden Daniels comes out with 30 points. And then Cooper Kupp, he played on Sunday night when I pretty much had the victory well in hand. But he got a late game touchdown to help out my point total, which is nice for tiebreakers down the road. Malik Neighbors, he did all right. Jahmyr Gibbs and Aaron Jones held down the fort, getting a touchdown. Jahmyr Gibbs actually getting 2 touchdowns. Aaron Jones going over for 100 yards. And then my pickup of the week, Jonnu Smith. He's been great for the Dolphins the last couple weeks. Caught a couple touchdowns in the last few weeks. Got one in this game, 9 catches, 87 yards. He's been the best Dolphins receiver as far as the last couple weeks go.
I don't know if he was on anyone's radar.
No.
It's amazing that he's outperforming Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, and he's been one of those tight ends that's floated around in the league for a long time, and he's super athletic, and just nobody could figure out how to use him, it seemed like, and now he's finally been getting going. Juwan Jennings, I had to start him. I didn't really have any other options because Devontae Smith got hurt leading up to the game, so I didn't have any really good backup plans.
It's hard to trust any 49er receiver or running back with their quarterback situation. Yeah. You quickly realize that without Purdy, Niners, they're a different team.
Yeah, and if Devontae Smith wasn't ruled out, I would have played him over Jennings just because of the quarterback situation. TJ Hawkinson, he had a terrible game. So
you mean the week before? Or?
No, I'm talking about this week. So
really?
It was really frustrating because if you watch the game, because I was watching this game pretty closely because the Lions got over pretty soon. TJ Hawkinson had, I think, like 3 catches for, he might have only had 2 catches for 30 or 40 yards or something like that. In the fourth quarter and overtime, he had like 4 catches of 25 yards plus. And so for any TJ Hawkinson managers, it just felt weird that he got all these weird catches late in the game. Now, I'm not going to complain because it was great. But
garbage time, it just points, man.
It just felt weird. So I don't know what to do going forward. At the moment, I don't have him starting next week anyway, but it was just a weird game because he, for the longest time, had nothing. And then at the end of the game, it seemed like Chicago was just letting him chunk away. And I don't know if Chicago was maybe trying to do a prevent defense to try to prevent them losing. But,
we'll talk more about this when my matchup rolls around. But the crazy thing about that Viking-Chicago game is I looked up the Chicago defense to see how they fared against wide receivers, quarterbacks, and running backs. And they're at the top of the league as far as defense against the passing game, against quarterbacks and against wide receivers. Yet, the Vikings quarterback and wide receivers had a field day against the Bears defense, and I don't understand that.
Well, now the one caveat to that, Justin Jefferson had a terrible game.
Yeah, so they just focus so much on one guy that they just let the other guys run free.
Yeah, and because Minnesota is one of those teams that, they have multiple receivers that are very solid, they were able to take advantage of it. There was times where people were posting on Twitter that the Bears were just like double, triple teaming Justin Jefferson as he got towards the end zone, and they were going to let anybody else beat them but Justin Jefferson. They almost got away with it, but then Minnesota won in overtime. But yeah, it was weird that Addison had a huge game, Hawkinson had a huge game, and Justin Jefferson was just nothing.
Jefferson had a great quote after the game where he said, look, you give me a choice between me having a big game or my teammates having a big game. He's like, I'll take my teammates over me any day. And I'm like, wow, that's a team player right there.
Yeah. On Becky's side, had a average game from Jalen Hurts. He didn't get his normal rushing touchdown that he's been getting. Jackson Smith and Jigba had a good game.
That's a couple from this guy. I think
Yeah.
this like maybe his third week in a row where he put up points.
Yeah, and he's been kind of taking over Tyler Lockett's role finally. And he's been getting more looks than DK Metcalf lately because he's that slot receiver. And he's been playing really well. George Pickens struggled again, snow game. Russell Wilson just couldn't really throw the ball all that well in the snow. The biggest letdown, Christian McCaffrey had one of his worst games that we've seen in a long time from him. And this is also, I can't remember the exact stat, but this is the first time in maybe his career or maybe in a long, long time that he hasn't had a touchdown in 3 games. He's not gone scoreless.
I mean, he's got to be the top candidate for bust of the year. And I know injury played a big role, but
Yeah.
I don't think anyone was really expecting that when they drafted him number 1 overall.
Right.
And so at the end of the season, he's got to get the award for biggest bust of the
Yeah.
season. And
Unless he picks it up in the playoffs. There's
Yeah.
always that chance. But yeah, right now it's not looking good for many 49ers. David Montgomery continues to find the end zone, even though he didn't have a spectacular day.
Yeah, but you had Gibbs, your opponent had Montgomery.
Yeah.
Have there been, especially if you look at daily fantasy or betting a parlay or whatever, have there been 2 more reliable backs in the NFL that score week after week after week, and you could even throw St. Brown into that equation.
Right.
These 2 running backs, these players they've been so reliable. It's impressive.
I mean, they both have over 10 touchdowns apiece, which is crazy. That's back-to-back seasons now that they've done that.
Yeah.
And this year they've done it even earlier. There's a chance they could both have 1,000 yards by the end of the season, which they were really close to last year.
Wow.
So if they could do that, that'd be spectacular. Trey McBride had a huge game. Continues to be Kyler Murray's number 1 option. He almost screwed you over in the ESPN league, but
Yeah, you know what? And you reach out to me before the game, and you go, "Hey, Joe, I noticed McBride's on your bench." And I said, "Well, I picked up Disley, and he's been on a roll." And that almost cost me that game. And I saw McBride blow up on my bench, and Disley did just enough to get me that win. It's one last catch at the end of the game. But, McBride's back in my lineup.
And if you would have played McBride, I don't know how I would have felt about it, because that was a big game for both of us in that league. And, as much as I always say I want my competition to be at their peak when I play them, it still would have felt bad. But you got the win anyway, so I was due for a close loss to you. But that was fun. Marvin Harrison continues to be also one of the biggest busts of the season.
He's been up and down. He's had the occasional big game, but more quiet games, and that's just kind of Arizona as a whole. They'll put together a couple of big games and then just disappear for a few weeks.
Which leads right into James Conner, who has been one of the most reliable running backs this year. Only had 8 yards, and then he had 5 catches, so that kind of saved his day. But Arizona just looked really bad all of a sudden, and Seattle won a weird 16-6 game. So Becky just had some rough luck all around. And insult to injury, Brandon Aubrey missed 2 field goals.
That was crazy. I mean, here's a guy who puts up 50-plus yarders like they're the extra points, and then he missed 2 short kicks.
Yeah.
And weather wasn't a factor.
Right.
It was just really odd. But I don't know. It's sometimes these kickers get the yips. Like you look at was it Tucker from Baltimore who
Tucker
kept
struggled
kick after kick after dominating that position for years. He was missing short kicks. It's crazy.
And he at one point was the leading field goal percentage kicker in NFL history.
Yeah.
He fell out of that role. Young Wei Koo took over as the top percentage, and then right after he had some issues. So now it's Eddie Pinheiro, who is the all-time percentage leader or something like that.
Now, I don't want to jinx anybody here, but do you know who has not missed a field goal this season?
Yes, I do.
Who is that?
The Lions kicker, Jake Bates.
He has been a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
Glad he's on our team.
Right. And the other good thing about this matchup that Becky and I had is nobody left anything really on the bench. Mark Andrews had another touchdown game. he continues to be frustrating for me in other leagues, which I've basically gotten away from him and everything, but continues to have a good season overall. Just been a little bit frustrating on the fantasy side. The next matchup with the next highest scoring, was the other Tysick. My wife, Marie,
Right.
put up 151 on Sammy, knocking Sammy completely out of the playoff race.
And, we were just talking about how Becky put up decent points, but
Yeah.
134 to
Yeah.
get a loss.
Mm-hmm.
He just can't shake the bad luck.
Yeah.
It's been brutal for him.
Right. And, I mean, luckily in this case, the team that he needed to lose also won. So even if he would have won this matchup, I think he would have been eliminated from the playoffs either way. But still frustrating when you had a chance still and just come up a little bit short. So Marie benefiting from Patrick Mahomes' play. He's played really well the last couple weeks.
She made the right call this week. She benched Goff, even though the Lions won. He had a pedestrian game.
Yep.
Mahomes has been on a roll. I think I read that in 3 of the last 4 games, he's had 3 touchdown games. So he's starting to help fantasy owners late in the season when they need it.
Yeah, and I think her logic is just, she has Travis Kelce, so just roll out with, the duo. CeeDee Lamb kind of struggled, but he had 10 catches, got a 67 yards, so nothing crazy. But I think the volume is going to be there no matter who's at quarterback. So I don't think he's going to have those big blow-up weeks that we've seen in the past from him, but I think he'll still be solid throughout the rest of the season. The biggest surprise to me of the season, and I feel like he does this almost every year, is Courtland Sutton.
Yeah, he's benefiting from the play of rookie Knicks, and they've been firing on all cylinders. I mean, earlier this season, Denver was considered one of the worst teams in the league, but now somehow it's all gelling, and they're playing really well.
And again, one of the things that I've said before in this league especially, or in any league that's a 4-point per passing touchdown for quarterbacks, if you have their wide receiver, you can cancel out their points. Who did Sammy start at quarterback? Bo Nix.
Yeah.
And so those 2 passing touchdowns that he got gave him 8 points, but they gave 12 points to Courtland Sutton.
Yeah.
And that can make a difference. And he put up 29. Bo Nix put up 19. If your wide receiver can, knock out the opponent's quarterback, basically, that's usually a good advantage.
Yeah.
Derrick Henry didn't get into the end zone, surprisingly.
Well, he did.
Well, you're right. You're right. He got called back. A lot of penalties in that game.
They said is it the first time this season that he did not score a touchdown?
I believe so.
Yeah, and he's one of the most betted, weekly bets to score a touchdown week after week, and they said it's the first time that he did not officially get into the end zone. Yeah,
it's been his first one. But he still ended up with 140 yards on the ground, which was spectacular for 14 points, so that's not too bad. DeAndre Swift, again, continues to just go backwards after he had a big mid-season push.
Yeah.
But now he's kind of struggling again. Travis Kelce, kind of the same deal. He had a good stretch for a while. He's kind of come back down to earth. But for a tight end, again, 12 points, still solid. Calvin Ridley, been really good for the Titans lately.
He's been pretty much their only bright spot, and he's out there just running his butt off, catching passes. He's like, come on, guys, let's play some football. And I don't think the rest of his team cares.
Yeah, and they're not a very good team, even though they did beat Houston this week. But they're coming from behind a lot, so they got to throw the ball a lot, and he's just going to be their number one option. Yeah. DK Metcalf continuing to kind of struggle the last couple games after his injury. And kind of normal Chris Boswell in Philly defense.
Yeah, Boswell's been hot lately, but
game.
Yeah, this game was affected by the weather, so
right.
But yeah, Boswell's been on fire.
Yeah, and then Sammy finally swapped out his quarterback, like we said, went to Bo Nix, who's been really good. He's in that Rookie of the Year race, but unfortunately, he's going up against Denver's wide receiver, number 1 wide receiver, like we said. A.J. Brown getting back on track, gave him 22 points. DeAndre Hopkins got in the end zone, so that got him 14.5. But then his running backs. He has 2 running backs that did almost nothing, and then 2 running backs that had really good games. Jonathan Taylor against the Lions just continues to show how good the Lions are against running backs.
They are, and I don't care who's going up against the Lions. They're going to
Yeah.
affect their final numbers.
Mm-hmm. I feel not terrible because it didn't end up costing him, but I was the one that suggested Tyrone Tracy for Sammy to play.
Yeah.
He went with my advice. He liked my advice. I think I had sound advice. He had 42 rushing yards, 4 receptions, and 28 yards. So that was a good stat line. The problem was he fumbled. And once he fumbled, he got out of the game. So he sat the entire fourth quarter of the game.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, so that's why he ended up losing a couple points. He would have had about 11 or 12 points without the fumble. And then who knows, he could have got a couple more passes and had maybe a 15, 16-point game. But right after the fumble, they sat him the rest of the game, which was like the entire fourth quarter, I believe. He also went with the Will Dissly pickup, like many of us have, as Will Dissly's been a really solid option for people. And then Achane and Josh Jacobs just found the end zone over and over and over and over. Achane kind of crazily had 2 receiving touchdowns after only had 32 rushing yards. But the touchdown saved his day. And then Josh Jacobs just ran all over San Francisco as they are just struggling all around.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, on the benches, didn't really leave too much on the bench. Sammy would have replaced Tyrone Tracy with J.K. Dobbins, who only had 8.9.
He got hurt in the game.
So, like I said, him playing Tracy really wasn't a big deal. Makes me feel better. And then Michael Pittman Jr. on Marie's bench had an okay game, but I don't think I would have sat anybody else. Next highest scoring matchup was yours. You went up against Ian. We're close, but just there's a guy on his team that had a pretty good game, huh?
Yeah, I started out strong on Thursday. I had Chubb in my starting lineup, which I totally forgot that Cleveland had a Thursday game and the game had kicked off, and I was like, oh, I still got Chubb in my starting lineup because the previous week he didn't do a whole lot.
Right.
That was a little bit of luck for me because Chubb had a really nice game, 19 points on Thursday, and so I got off to a good start, and I made the mistake of texting Ian and saying there's no way you could overcome this league.
Oh, you didn't tell me that. Oh,
I was
no.
joking, of
Come
course,
on.
but you know me when I trash talk. So so I was off to
jeez.
a good start, but I really, throughout the day, I really thought that I had a really good chance of beating him. But we got to talk about a guy he started and a guy that I left on my bench. So
True.
anyone who started Barkley this week was guaranteed to win. There's no way you're going to lose.
I almost lost.
Yeah,
I almost lost.
True. But, I mean, in the ONTV League, Barkley was credited with 46 points. I mean, that's got to be one of the biggest point totals in the history of this league.
Yeah.
He just could not be stopped. It was like playing an opponent on Madden who just had some weird glitch that they exploited, and my jaw just hung open, and I'm like, how do you overcome that? And it was a fairly close game, but the mistake that I made was benching one of my favorite players, Addison, with the Vikings, who most experts said bench Darnold, bench your Vikings wide receivers because Chicago's pass defense is just that good. So I took the advice of the experts, benched Jordan Addison, and he put up 30 points on my bench. He had one of the best games of his career, if not the best game of the career. And when you look at the difference in our score, 10 points, if I would have replaced Debo, which occurred to me without Purdy, if I would have replaced Worthy, I would have won this game easily.
Yeah.
And I left Addison on my bench, thanks experts, and lost by 10 points.
And not to add salt to the wound, but I know that it affected a lot of matchups. It's how I won my matchup in our big league. That final 70-yard touchdown that Barkley got also would be the difference because it was 7 points plus 6.
Yeah.
So that was a huge deal in a lot of leagues. For me, it was even bigger because we have the 200-yard bonus that I also received. So that was like a 15-point swing for me in that league, which was wild. So even that, because, Philadelphia had a good lead at that point. They didn't really need to keep their starters in, and then Barkley breaks one off on the first play of that drive. And that's also the difference in this matchup, which it's crazy how things can change so quickly.
He got Evans back, who looked healthy out there, put up 11 points.
Yeah, nothing crazy.
Let's see who else. See, a lot of his other players got single digits. He and his entire squad pretty much rode on the back of Barkley.
Right.
I had Stafford in my starting lineup. I don't think he had any turnovers. He put up 19 points, which is adequate.
Yeah.
Who else? Hubbard, 15 points. Kate Otten, the Tampa Bay tight end, who's been on fire in recent weeks. Yeah. Measly 4 points.
Yeah, you got to wonder if it's partially to do with Mike Evans being back. But also, right. Your other player, Bucky Irving, went off.
Yeah, and Bucky Irving has been a blessing. I took a chance on him earlier in the season, and I'm at the point now where I just leave him in and don't worry about him. And to get 27 points from, I don't even know if you can consider him Tampa Bay's number one running back, because I think White still holds that position.
Yeah, I think maybe only on the depth chart, but it might be flipping.
Yeah. So 27 points from Irving. Dicker had a really nice game, 250 yarders.
Yeah.
So my team put up some points, and had I not benched Addison, I would have gotten a desperately needed win. But Ian, he's been on fire. His team's putting up points week after week after week. I was nervous heading into this matchup, and almost pulled it off. But
right.
He's kind of a front runner heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, luckily you both kind of missed a couple opportunities on the bench. I do think Addison is more likely to start than him to start DJ Moore, because Chicago's just been all over the place and DJ Moore hasn't been that great. But still, pretty wild. If anybody had Saquon Barkley and lost, I feel for you, but wasn't very likely. And then finally, the final matchup, the biggest upset of the week that kind of ruined everything.
This is the upset of all upsets. Tracy's team has just been a juggernaut, putting up monster points week after week after week. Malik, for the most part, has given up on his team. He starts players who are on IR or on a bye. Yeah. I thought this was going to be a no-brainer. Unfortunately, Tracy was crippled by bye week. She lost her Bengals players for the week.
Right.
And for her to only put up 75 points is a shocker.
Yeah.
She probably sat there numb in disbelief going, what the heck happened?
Yep. Like I said, Justin Jefferson just had an awful weekend. Chicago really locked onto him. The nice thing for her, even though Burrow was out because of the bye, Baker Mayfield has been really good for Tampa Bay this year. Didn't get any touchdowns besides the rushing touchdown. So that's kind of the big flaw there, that he didn't get a lot of points because he didn't get many touchdowns. Josh Downs, the fill-in for Jamar Chase basically for the week. He had a down game. You thought against Detroit they would be throwing it a lot more. He got a little bit banged up in this game. Just didn't do what we thought he might. And then Joe Mixon, who has been incredible all season, finally got stopped by the Titans. And again, a weird loss that Houston had against the Titans. Javonte Williams, who is on my dead to me list in our other league, but he, last week he had a really good game. Thought maybe he got the starting job back. This week he had 8 carries for -2 rushing yards.
Wow.
And just looked awful. Sam Laporta continues to be in the biggest busts of the year pile.
Yeah.
Just because he was the number 1 tight end for a lot of people coming into the season, just isn't producing. And Zay Flowers also kind of had a down week. He's been really solid for Baltimore lately. Brian Robinson getting injured early in the game against a good matchup against Dallas.
That's happened to Tracy a couple of times where she had a player start, get hurt, and then she'd say the next day, I didn't know he was out. Well, no, he wasn't out. He started, and then he got hurt in the game. So she's been victimized by that a few times.
Right. And then meanwhile, Malik's team is pretty scary when you look at it on paper. He's got Lamar Jackson, who's been one of the best quarterbacks. Terry McLaurin, he got bailed out by that 80-yard touchdown to end the game, but still another big outing for him. Tyreek Hill, one of the biggest busts of the season, but he's been okay. Raheem Mostert did nothing. He has not been anywhere near what he was last year.
He should be on the waiver wire.
Yeah.
Like I picked him up as a bye week fill-in last week in another league, and he got me negative points. So that's back-to-back terrible weeks for Mostert. He should not be rostered in any league.
Right. Rashad White, like you mentioned, is technically the number one back for Tampa Bay, but he got in the end zone, which saved his day. Otherwise, he would have had a pretty bad day. George Kittle continues to be fantastic.
It doesn't matter what injury designation you have next to his name. If he had an O next to his name, he'd probably put up 12 points.
Yeah.
He's given Brock Bowers a run for his money as far as tight end of the year.
Right. Yeah, those two have been great. Lad McConkey has also come on really strong towards this back half of the season.
He in the ESPN league that we're in, he caused my loss last week, and he's been just a clutch player. He's easily Herbert's number one target right now. He's been fantastic, just pulling everything down.
Right.
While his teammate Johnson, or is it Johnston? It's
Johnston.
Yeah, he put up a big goose egg this past week. He was awful. Like watching him on the field, the ball hitting him in his hands, and his home crowd booing him. It was hard to watch.
He had a problem with that last year, and it looked like he kind of had it fixed a little bit this year, and it has not been good lately for him.
Yeah, he had a zero, put up 0 points on, 5 or 6 targets?
Right. And then the number one receiver, I would argue at this point, Puka Nacua for the Rams continues to just be fantastic week in and week out. Another 9 catches, over 100 yards. He's just been super consistent. And then again, like we mentioned last week, Malik got 0 from his kicker and his defense because he hasn't checked his lineup. But like I said, those were the 2 positions that you can kind of get away with it.
Yeah.
Now he also got basically a 0 from Raheem Mostert, so he almost got 3 zeros, and Tracy still lost, which is just rough. It doesn't happen very often. Luckily, she's locked into the playoffs. It wasn't a big matchup for her. But like I said, this was the reason that Sammy got knocked out of the playoffs, is Malik got this win. And it's also going to make it very tough for Becky to get in now because of this matchup.
And Tracy, her team's been playing so well that she could absorb this loss, got it out of the way. Her players are going to be coming back off a bye, and they'll be nice and refreshed and ready to go for the playoffs. So, Tracy, don't dwell too much on this loss. You're probably the favorite to go deep into the playoffs.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I think we mentioned it last week too, is she had no other options. So, this was her lineup. She couldn't do anything else. They were on bye. Everybody else was on bye. And the scary thing for Malik's team was Nico Collins is still on his IR slot from when Nico was injured. And so, Malik's team could be even better than it is.
Oh, my God. He put up 20 points in the IR.
Yeah.
It's a miracle.
So, Malik's team would have been really scary if he was setting his lineup. Like I said, if he does make the playoffs, we will make him set his lineup. It'll be good. And
Unless
we'll have good
he
matchups.
faces me. If he faces me, you shut your mouth.
Especially if he faces the Blockbusters. All right. So that was our Week 12 matchups. Like I said, big implications. We'll look at the standings real quick because we're doing this on Wednesday. Normally we try to do it on Tuesday so we can show some waiver wire options. Things got busy yesterday. So
it's not a whole lot on the waiver wire. Anyway.
No, and it seems like I'm the only one that's been checking waivers on these different leagues. I picked up Keenan Allen this week just because he has the Detroit matchup. I think the Bears might have to throw a lot, but I haven't even decided if I'm going to play him just yet. But I figured I'd pick him up. So the standings are as follows. Tracy's team locked in at right now at the number 1 seed, both 8-4, tied with Ian and Marie. All 3 of those teams locked into the playoffs, and the points scored is the tiebreaker. So at the moment, Tracy's in first, Ian's in second, and Marie is in third. And then there's me and Joe and Malik, all at 6-6, and Becky at 4-8. And then Sammy, like I said, 2-10, officially eliminated. But I know Sammy wants to play spoiler to somebody if he can.
Yeah.
Becky hoping for me, Joe, or Malik to lose 2 games in a row and for her to win 2 games in a row. But yeah, it's gonna be an uphill battle for her.
I can't believe I have the same record as a guy who stopped trying. I try every week to put in my best possible lineup, and I have the same record as a guy who plays players on bye weeks.
Yeah. Hey, me too. And he has less points scored than us, but he does have more points against him than you, so I guess you've gotten a little bit lucky in that aspect.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of points against me, but I've picked it up the last couple weeks. So moving on to week 13, the matchups we have, me playing Ian, and right now the total is 140 to 134, and I believe our lineups are set. For right now, unless anything changes for my team, I think this is what I'm going to go with. Josh Allen, Cooper Kupp, Neighbors, Gibbs, Aaron Jones, Jonnu Smith, T. Higgins, and Bijan Robinson. I don't think I have any. Oh, I do have Jonnu Smith on Thanksgiving and Jahmyr Gibbs and Neighbors. Okay, this is the league that I have a couple. I have a player in each one of the Thanksgiving games, which is going to be fun. Josh Allen's going to be Sunday night. Again, I'm hoping that the weather's not too bad, but at least having Josh Allen, I'll know that maybe he can run a little bit, get some extra points there.
We also have a Black Friday game this week.
Yeah, which is weird to even think about. On the other side, Ian's got Amon-Ra St. Brown going on Thanksgiving, and he's got Brock Bowers on the Black Friday game, and Jaden Reed going up against Miami. So we'll have about the same amount of players in those 2 days going into the Sunday slate. We'll have 3 players already going.
What do you know about the questionable tag on St. Brown?
It sounds like he's going to be fine. I believe it was his knee. Montgomery is the shoulder, but yeah, today they were both listed as full participants.
Okay.
And usually that is just a walkthrough, which it is because they play tomorrow. So it looks like he's going to be okay. Again, Amon-Ra is a really tough player, so unless he's really banged up, I think he should be good to go. And then, like I said, I don't think I'm going to really make any changes, and I don't know if Ian's going to make any changes because I think his lineup is pretty much set as far as I can see.
High-scoring matchup looking at this.
Yeah, I believe we're the highest. I think we're the highest projected total for the week. Oh, I guess Tracy and Marie have a slightly higher total. So I'll go to that one next. So Tracy playing up against Marie. This is a battle for first place if Ian loses. And right now, Tracy is projected 148 points after putting up 75 last week. That would be nice for her, I'm sure. Again, she has her full slate of her lineup back.
Boy, she couldn't wait to get those players back into the starting lineup.
Yeah, the one thing I will caution is they are going. Cincinnati is going up against Pittsburgh, who has been a tough defense. So projections might be a little high. Right now, it looks like Kamara is projected the highest at 19.32 against the Rams. Chase Brown, also a high projection. Let's see. What are they? Marie has CeeDee Lamb on Thanksgiving. She also has Cortland Sutton on Monday night to close out the week. Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce are going to be on that Black Friday game. DeAndre Swift is on the Thanksgiving game. And that looks about it. For Tracy, she has Sam Laporta tomorrow and Jake Bates. And then the rest of her team plays on Sunday. So if Marie gets out to a little bit of a lead after those Thursday and Friday games, Tracy could be looking at a nice little comeback try. And I believe their lineups are probably set as well. Looks like Marie set her lineup to put Michael Pittman Jr. in over Calvin Ridley. Again, I'm not going to try to influence her at all because last time that happened, it didn't go too well. But maybe I'll ask her about it. Maybe I won't. And looks like Tracy's pretty much set. She also has Pittsburgh defense, which she could technically play, but might be a bad option with all her
against
Cincinnati
her own
players.
That's always a dilemma.
Right. So this would be another high-scoring affair. Like I said, this would almost solidify Tracy as a first-place team unless Ian wins, I guess, against me as well. But just gives a little bit more separation up at the top. The next matchup, this is the big one. The big one of the week, the Blockbusters versus the sixth-place Showboats.
You are not going to hear any trash talking out of me. You know, a few weeks ago I might have said, oh, it's like a bye week. I've learned not to do that.
Yeah.
His roster, despite some of those vacancies.
Mm-hmm.
His starting lineup looks really, really solid for the most part.
Yeah.
So I'm not taking this game for granted. I am favored to win right now by about 8 points.
Yeah.
I put Addison back in my starting lineup. I'm not going to bench him again.
Mm-hmm.
Going with Stafford in at quarterback. I don't know what Purdy's prognosis is for this weekend.
He's
but
out, I believe.
he has been ruled out.
I want to say that was official, but maybe I'm thinking of a different player. Oh no, he was limited on Wednesday, so there's still a chance.
I just don't know
trying to
if I
think of who I
trust
was
the
thinking
Niners
of,
right now. But
again, that could be a weather game. It's
yeah,
a little nervy.
well, the Rams Saints game is predicted to be a shootout, so I'm hoping that we'll get some points from him.
Yeah.
I'm loaded at running back. Even though Breece Hall got a questionable tag pop up today, it's from a knee injury he received 2 weeks ago, so I can't imagine it's really going to affect his performance this weekend. I think it's just something they were obligated to do.
Yeah.
So, I got Bucky, Breece Hall, Kyron Williams, and Chuba Hubbard at running back. I really think that is a solid platoon of running backs.
Yeah, the only one I would say that, and I feel like I brought it up the last couple of weeks, Kyron Williams just kind of been getting by the last couple of weeks.
He had 2 fumbles this past weekend, and that was a little concerning. One, he lost the fumble when the Rams were threatening to score, but they gave the ball right back to him, like on the very next possession, first play. They were like, here, take the ball. But then he lost it again, and luckily the Rams fell on it later in the game, but fumbling could be an issue.
Yeah.
But, he's had such a solid season.
It's not
good. Like 16 games in a row where he scored a touchdown.
Yeah, it's not like you're going to sit him or anything, but it is just a little bit of a thought.
Yeah. The one guy, like I said, I'm so loaded at running back. I'm kind of forced to bench Chubb this week. They're playing a tough Denver defense. And there's a good chance that Pacheco might get activated for Friday's game. He's still on IR. Going to keep an eye on that. But that would be really tempting to try and work his way into my starting lineup with the depth I have at running back. So it's something I'm going to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
I might not have to take that risk this week. But we'll see.
Me personally, and again, I don't want to try to be an influence, but in this league, because you have the depth there, I don't think there's a need to plug him in just because there's a chance that he doesn't play a full set of snaps.
Right.
And you can see how he progresses and then set him into your lineup week 14 just before the playoffs. Really get a good idea of what he's going to look like and then go from there.
That's what's exciting, and it's what's so stressful about being close to the bubble for playoffs. But if I do make the playoffs, knowing that I'll get Pacheco back for that, had he not gotten injured earlier in the season, he probably would have been a top 5 back this season. So I'm excited that hopefully I'll get him back. And like I said, clean slate come playoffs week 1.
Yeah. And then Malik's team, like we said, they always look scary on paper. Lamar Jackson going up against Philly. Now, that's a tough matchup, so maybe that'll slow him down. Terry McLaurin going up against Tennessee. That's a bad matchup, honestly. Tennessee has been pretty good against wide receivers. Tyreek Hill, like I said, he just hasn't been as good as he's been in the past, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Raheem Mostert, basically a 0. Harrison Butker, also a 0, but Malik is getting his defense back. In Buffalo, going against San Francisco, whether it's Brock Purdy or not, again, because of the weather, that could be a good game for Buffalo's defense. George Kittle, always scary. Even in the snow, I think George Kittle is the guy that loves playing snow games.
Yeah.
I can tell.
Those are probably those 3 names right there are the ones that make me the most nervous is Kittle, McConkey, and Nakua.
Yeah.
They've been on a tear lately, so
and like we said,
they make me nervous.
Like I mentioned in the last matchup with Marie and Sammy, any points that go to Nakua are going to Stafford, but Nakua is usually going to make more points out of it.
Right.
So any touchdown that goes to Nakua is just going to hurt you slightly.
Yeah, because he has a slight edge on that. But you got Kupp, as an option.
And you have Kyron Williams. So anything that Kyron Williams gets is taking away from Nakua. So you do have a little bit of both. And then, like we said, you don't have to worry about Nico Collins because Nico Collins is going up against the Jaguars this week, and that would be terrifying. But again, Malik not setting his lineup. We're not going to worry about it, but crazy. And then finally, we have the bottom of the barrel teams, which I don't know how Sammy feels about this, but I feel like Sammy wants to drag Becky down with him. And like I said, he's going to try to play spoiler and try to win this matchup. And it's a close projection. Becky's projected 138. Sammy's projected 133. Sammy's got Jordan Love going on Thanksgiving, as well as anybody else. Achan is going, and Josh Jacobs. So a lot of his key players going on Thanksgiving, so he'll figure out right away what his team is doing. Becky has David Montgomery and Brandon Aubrey, Detroit's defense. So none of her real key players. I know David Montgomery has been really solid, but he hasn't been blowing people away. So that'll be interesting there. And then same situation that you just ran into is that Sammy has A.J. Brown and Becky has Jalen Hurts. So anything that goes to Brown is going to be points to Sammy, which will make things fun.
Imagine being in that situation where, Sammy's eliminated from the playoffs and he has a chance to eliminate Becky from the playoffs. If she gets the win, she's going to need other people to lose, but Sammy could end her season this weekend.
Well, the one thing that helps Becky is that if she wins, one of you or Malik will lose. So that gives her a chance. And then if the person that loses in your matchup loses in week 14 and Becky wins, there's a chance that she could make up that ground. But
so she needs this game.
Yeah, but like I said, I think she's a little bit far away in points to break the ties that she would need. So she is up on an uphill battle. Her team also needs to just score really well. But there's still a chance. So we're not counting it out. And yeah, that's our matchups going into Thanksgiving and Black Friday. Preparing for week 14. That's another thing I would say, since we didn't do a waiver wire segment. Look ahead to week 14 and see who's out there on the waiver wire. Look at the team, the players that you're going to have on bye, and if you can make a move now before week 14 starts, that might be something to look at to get ahead of the competition. And then, like I've said before, look at defenses for the playoffs. You want to start looking ahead so that you can beat everybody else to the punch.
And you brought up a good point before the podcast. Now is the time to look at handcuffs for some of your stud players.
Yeah.
If you have, Barkley, look at Gainwell.
Yeah.
If you have Breece Hall, look at
Braylon Allen.
So with the playoffs looming, you don't want to lose a stud to injury and have no one to plug in.
Yeah.
So look at handcuffs. If you have people you can drop on your bench, replace them with handcuffs.
Right. Yeah, that's a big thing, because a lot of these stud running backs, they're going to have, a lot of them have good backups that would take over that same role. Now, obviously, they're not going to be as talented, but they'll be used in similar ways that you can get comparable points. And like you said, you don't want to be stranded, especially going into the playoffs, that, some unfortunate injury happens that you're just stuck.
Yeah, and you got to play someone off your bench. Yeah.
Right. Actually, looking at the point totals for the standings, if Malik loses both weeks and Becky wins both weeks, she does hold the tiebreaker.
Oh, wow.
So she would be able to take that tiebreaker and make it into the playoffs. And then you and I, if we both happen to lose 2 times in a row, she would have some ground to make up. So she would have to score a lot, and we would have to struggle a little bit for her to make it in. But there's definitely a chance still, if Malik loses both these weeks, that Becky will make the playoffs. But she controls her own destiny. She's got to get the wins.
Yeah.
And that green Buckeye is going to be that first one in her way. So it's going to be fun.
And he's like a hungry badger, man.
I know. He doesn't care who he takes down with him. He just wants somebody.
He wants to cause chaos.
Exactly. So good luck to everybody in week 13. Happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the Thanksgiving games. There's 3 of them. We got the Black Friday game and then the normal slate on Sunday with Sunday night, Monday night. And then next week, like I said, that's the big bye week 14, which is crazy to have the week before the playoffs. So just prepare for it. ahead of time.
I think the combination of turkey and the Giants-Cowboys game, I'm going to be out like a light.
Yeah, everybody's going to be
passed out,
taking a nap. But I don't know, unless you have players like I have Malik Neighbors going, and I don't know. I'm a football sicko at this point. I might have to watch it anyway, but I might be fighting the same thing. I might be going into that food coma.
Yeah.
So we'll see. So good luck to everybody, and hope for a good week for you, and we'll see you guys next week.